When did you receive that document? We had a conference. You have to have 2 conferences with the principal and the superintendent during the probationary period. The conference was held in his office between the superintendent and myself. This is in duplicate. He receives a copy. A copy goes in my file. What was the approximate date of this conference? It was during April. We signed it together. It is dated 4/22/69, April of '69. Directing your attention to the document, what type of official rating did you receive at that time? Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay. It is overruled. Outstanding. May I approach the witness, Your Honor? Yes, you may. Directing your attention to Peoples 9 for identification only. Do you recognize that document? Yes, I do. What is that document? It is the second performance report. Where did you receive that document? In the superintendent's office. Who was the superintendent at that time? Dr. John Lingle. Did he give you that document personally? Yes, sir. And did he sign that document? Yes, sir. Do you recognize his signature on that particular document? Yes, sir. Did you also sign the document? Not this one. You signed the other copy? Yes, sir, the official one. When did you receive that document? This one? Yes, 6/10/70. Now that was your efficiency rating on that document. Objection, hearsay. It is overruled. I will join in that objection, Your Honor. It is hearsay because it is not this witness's statement. It is overruled. Outstanding. May I approach the witness, Your Honor? Yes, you may. Directing your attention to Peoples 10 for identification. Do you recognize that document? Yes, sir. What is that document? It is a letter mailed to me after a visit by the assistant superintendent. He is entitled Administrative Coordinator. He visited our school one day and I received this a few days later. Is he the assistant superintendent over the district that your school was in? That is right. Your supervisor? Yes. Or one of your supervisors? One of mine. You received that particular letter through the United States mail? Yes. When? In February. It was written February the 9th. I probably received it the 10th or 11th. I beg your pardon. I'm sorry. It would have been by school mail. It came by school mail? Yes, sir. What year was that, please? 72. Is the letter written on official school paper? Yes, sir. Has the letter been signed? Yes, sir. Do you recognize the signature? Yes. Have you seen the signature before? It is just his first name. Have you seen it before? Yes, sir. Have you seen it on numerous occasions? Pardon? How many occasions have you seen it? On many, many occasions, because he was superintendent and supervisor. He would send directives out and so forth. Does he evaluate your school in that letter? Yes, sir. What type of evaluation? Objection, Your Honor. There is no showing that this is a formal evaluation. Counsel, would you state a legal objection, please? A hearsay. It is overruled. Would you repeat the question? What type of evaluation? Well, he evaluates the school, the attitude of the staff, etc. I would say it is an outstanding report. Would you read the report? Objection, Your Honor. There is no foundation for reading this report. It is a self-serving statement prepared by one of this man's superiors. Counsel, please state a legal objection. It is a self-serving document. It is hearsay. There has been no legal foundation and there is no showing that this is any type of a business document. I would suggest that the court should view the document before allowing this individual to read it. Sure, I have no objection. Marshal, would you obtain the document from the witness, please, and hand it to the court? Now, the objection is overruled. May I approach the witness, Your Honor? Yes, you may. Mr. Foster, would you read that document? Mr. Jack Foster, Vermont Avenue School. Dear Jack, in my next life I am convinced I shall attempt to become an elementary school principal. I never saw a person so happy, satisfied, and turned on as you appear to be at Vermont Avenue Elementary School. I was surely impressed and reassured about the future of American public education after spending the morning at your school. I wish the education critics could see the dedication, the high staff morale, and the high grade of learning. In one sentence, a summary of your school would be a paraphrase from South Pacific. Happy people make happy times. It is indeed a great pleasure to work with leaders of your caliber. Sincerely yours, Paul J. Schwartz, Administrator, Coordinator. Mr. Foster, you received this letter in February of 1972. Is that correct? Yes, sir. Now, Mr. Foster, approximately how many students were enrolled at Vermont Avenue School during the year of 71 to 72? I believe around 1,150. I am really not sure. Around 1,150? Yes. Approximately how many teachers for 1,150 children? For regular classroom teachers, you would have around 36 or 37, but we had special programs, so we had a staff that was well into the 40s, approaching 50. Did you also have aides at that time in 72? 71 to 72. Yes, in 72, but not 71. We received aides when we worked Title I, which is the last part of 71. The last part of 71? Yes. So it would be the school year of 71 to 72. And from September of 71, from September 71 on, yes. Approximately how many school aides did you have? About 26. In order for one to become a school aide, do they have to pass any type of class or interview? Yes, they have to be interviewed, and they have to, it depends on what type of aide. We had two types of aides, an aide 3 and an aide 2. Would you explain what those type of aides are or their duties? An aide 3 must have a high school education, a 12th grade education or equivalent. They have to be interviewed by the community as well as the administration. They must follow other civil service rules such as no arrest records, etc. They are allowed to work supervising children. The aide 2 cannot supervise children. They do not need a 12th grade education. Now the aide 3 that supervised children, do they have to do that under the direction of an instructor? Yes, sir. Other than the aides 2 and 3, were there any personnel authorized by you or the school district to come upon the campus and conduct classes? Objection, compound, sustained. Other than the school aides, were there any other individuals authorized to come onto the school campus and conduct classes by you? Yes, sir. Would you explain to the court and the jury who the other individuals would have been? First, it was a training school for the university. So you have student teachers. The student teachers were allowed to come on campus and proceed to the room and conduct classes under the supervision of their master teacher. And we also have student teachers from Immaculate Heart who trained from that university also. And their students were invited on campus. We also had doctoral candidates from the University of Southern California in the field of special education. Doctorate candidates, doctoral candidates. They were allowed to come on campus. And they worked on the transition program and on our EH class. When you say EH class, would you explain that? That is for the educationally handicapped child. All right. 10, 11. This is a 180, 4 boys for 5 minutes. We're starting with direct examination by plaintiff's attorney. Plaintiff's attorney is Mr. Ricks, R-I-C-K-S. Defense attorney is Mr. Williams, W-I-L-L-I-A-M-S. Mr. Buell, B-U-E-L-L, City of Cerritos. Artesia Boulevard. Edison right-of-way. Union Development Company. Mr. Smith, S-M-I-T-H. Okay. Direct by plaintiff 180. Ready? Mr. Buell, you are the plaintiff in this action? Yes. And in what city do you presently reside? Cerritos. How long have you resided in that city? 8 years, and prior to executing the lease, which is in evidence as Exhibit 1, had you been a resident of the city of Cerritos? No. Prior to the execution of the Exhibit 1, had you examined the real property that is the subject of that lease? Yes. Can you describe generally for the court the nature of improvements, if any, that were on the property at the time of the execution in 1993? Was a vacant field that had grown up with vegetation. Will you tell the court the approximate location of the property and its size in the city of Cerritos? It's south of Artesia Boulevard and adjacent to the river on the east bank. And there was 4.5 acres of property adjacent to the street. And there was an Edison right-of-way. An Edison right-of-way? Yes. And looking at the rough diagram that is marked as Exhibit 9, I see a roughly triangular portion with some red and green lines within them. Can you tell the court whether or not what that purported to identify? That would be a portion 4.5 acres of real estate outside the easement. When you executed the lease, was there an additional portion of property that was subject to that lease, to your understanding? Well, there was a portion north of there, which was approximately 550 or 600 feet north that was using, after the lease, we went in and used that as a construction area. Very well. Now, when did you go into the possession of the premises? Did you? What type of business did you begin? Object to as irrelevant. Well, it is foundation, Your Honor. Overruled. It was to be used as a construction yard and riding stable. From 1993 until 1998, did you place any personal property within the 4.3 acres that are identified on this exhibit? Yes. Can you tell the court from 1993 to 1998 what those items consisted of? Paved parking, fences, chain link fence, bathroom facilities, snack bar, bathrooms, landscaping, water well. Have you attempted to place those within the 4.3 or 4.5 acres on the Exhibit 9 for identification? Yes. With the court's permission. And could you step over with the pointer and point out their location to His Honor? Here is the pointer here. And if you could, at the time that you are pointing to them, indicate approximately when it was that you caused them to be installed. Well, the water well was the first thing put in because there was no water on the property. So we had to put that in within the next 4 or 5 months of operation. Next was the bathrooms, which was put in following the water well. Then these rail areas in here and the chain link fence was all required by the city. And they were all put in within the first year. The snack bar, part of the paving, was put in earlier, an area right in here. And then in 67, we put in all this additional parking. And we set off this area here in 67 or 68 for potential to move in a new or to relocate a house. The box stall area up here was built in 96 or 97. All right. Now, with respect to January of 1990, were you still on the premises operating the stable? Yes. Are you familiar with the amendment to the lease, which is in evidence as Exhibit 2, dated in December of 1998? Yes. At the time or just prior to that, did you have any conversation with Mr. Smith, the president of the company, regarding your intentions when you signed that lease? Yes. And what did you tell Mr. Smith? Well, at the time that we was discussing releasing the north part of the property where the construction yard had been. I have to object to the non-responsiveness of the answer at this time, Your Honor. There is a specific question pending, and that is, what did he say to Mr. Smith? Let me expand. Let me move to strike it also, Your Honor, and rephrase the question if I may. Sir, did you have a conversation with him just prior to executing Exhibit 2? It was probably in the summer, probably 3 months. And did that conversation concern the amendment to the lease regarding the release of certain properties in the lease? Object to that question, assuming a fact, not an evidence. Overruled. Yes. Can you tell the court what he told you and what you told him regarding the intention in signing Exhibit 2? I asked him if he could not take back the northern part of the lease We had received a tax bill on all this property and we couldn't make use of the property any longer. I would like to move to strike the response, Your Honor, as non-responsive. Yes?
Red Barrel.
Oh, thank you. All I could see was a pizza box. I thought you were bringing us pizza.
Pizza?
Not if it's in that trash can, now that I see the rest. All I saw was just the pizza box right there.
I'll work on that for you.
My stomach started growling. Okay, 160. But I'm on a diet, I wouldn't have touched it anyways. Okay, we are continuing with question by plaintiff's attorney. What examination? We're still in direct examination by plaintiff's attorney. Plaintiff's attorney, Mr. Ricks, R-I-C-K-S. Defense attorney is Mr. Williams, W-I-L-L-I-A-M-S. Okay, and city manager, City of Cerritos, Mr. Smith, Union Development. Okay, here we go. 160, question by plaintiff's attorney. Did you obtain building permits for the installation of any of the improvements? Yes. Do you remember now which ones you did obtain building permits for? The bathrooms, and we received a permit to move in buildings from the city manager, and we did move those in. And were those permits acquired prior to 1998? Yes. And between December of 1968 and January of 1970, did you receive any oral notice or written notice from Mr. Smith that he was going to sell the property to the city in lieu of condemnation? No. Did you receive any written notice or oral notice from the city that they were going to purchase the property from him in lieu of condemnation? No. When was the first notice that you received from either the city or him of the property that was to be sold? It was after the property was sold. After the property was sold, did you take steps to attempt to receive any compensation for the improvements that were on the parcel? Yes, we put in a request to him. We first asked him about the lease, and he said, well, the city has bought the property. Did he refuse to pay anything of the amount paid to him for those improvements? Yes. Your Honor, could I move to strike the answer for an objection to the question? Yes, sir. I'd like to object to the question that it assumes that he was paid for the improvements, and that is not in evidence that he was. Let me rephrase the question, Your Honor, so that it is clear, and I will withdraw that question. Did he refuse to pay you any money as a result of the purchase and sale of the subject property? Yes. And did he tell you to do anything with regard to collecting the sum? He said that we would have to approach the city. And did you do so? Yes. Did the city refuse to pay you any sum for the improvements on the property? Yes. Did you file a claim with the... Well, I won't ask that question. Counsel has stipulated that the plaintiff did file a claim with the city for compensation, and that claim is attached to the complaint. And we would just offer that as, well, you don't have to offer it. It is stipulated it was filed timely. Is that stipulation between the city and Mr. Buell? That's correct. I am not participating in the stipulation, is what I am saying. Now, with respect to the date of the deed, I believe, was January 15, 1990. While you were still in possession, did you form an opinion of the value of the improvements that were on the premises at that time, sir? I am going to object to that question as irrelevant at this time. Any testimony regarding valuation would be premature. There's been no showing that any of the improvements were compensable. Now, there's also been no evidence that any of the city's action resulted in any entitlement on the part of Mr. Buell to compensation for his improvements. I think that will be a conclusion of law for the court to decide at the conclusion, Your Honor. Well, the objection is overruled. Thank you. I'd like to refer your attention first, if you would, Mr. Buell, to the plaster bathrooms that you referred to. Will you tell the court in more detail the manner in which they were constructed, the type of improvement it was, and in your opinion, the value of those improvements as of January 15, 1990? Well, the plaster was concrete slab floors and a 1,000-gallon tank with leach lines. Would the value have what you are asking, what they would be worth at that time? Or, yes, that's correct, as of January 15, 1990. Cost of building, they were worth what they were put in at. In your opinion, what was the value? $3,500. With respect to the fencing that you have pointed out on the diagram, will you describe the chain link fence in terms of its length and type and give your opinion of value of that, please, as of the same date? And we will assume, when I'm saying your opinion of the value, that it is as of January 15, 1990, about 800 feet of chain link, roughly $500. And was there rail fencing on the property? Yes. And will you describe the length and, in your opinion, the value? Well, the rail fencing was all made from 4x6, probably $300 or $400. And was there grape stake fencing on the subject property? Yes. Will you describe that and give your opinion of the value, please? Well, there was grape stake surrounding the water well and the area that was on two sides of the area that we were going to move a house in on. Person at the station house? I do not remember. Do you recall ever meeting with a policeman face to face and giving a report as to this accident? Something like that happened. I do not recall whether I called on the phone first. Okay. But do you recall going into a police station in the valley and giving a report? Yes. And do you recall meeting an officer by the name of Officer Oliver, Oliver? I recall meeting with a police officer, but I do not recall his last name. And do you recall whether this was during daytime hours or evening hours? I think it was nighttime. Was it perhaps around 10? I withdraw that. I'm sorry. Was it approximately midnight? Probably close to that. Okay. Indeed, you go at midnight because that would save you from having to take time off from work. Probably that was the most convenient time for me at the time. Did the officer question you about how the accident occurred? They asked me questions concerning that. And was either your wife or your son with you at the police station? My wife was there. And was she there when the officer was questioning you, or did she remain outside or in the car or something? She was with me, as far as I recall. And for how long, approximately, did the officer question you about the accident? I think approximately 20 minutes. It's hard to say. Were you able to understand the officer's English? Most of it. Did the officer, to your recollection, ask you whether you or your wife or your son had been injured in the accident? Maybe he did, but I do not recall. You don't recall discussing any possible injuries with the officer? Maybe I did, but I'm not sure. Do you recall telling the officer that neither you, your wife, or your son had been injured? I do not recall telling him this. You do not recall him asking you about any injuries that any of you had? possibly suffered? I do not remember. Do you know of anyone other than Diane Barash who assisted you or came to see how you were after the accident? Any witnesses? I do not know of any. In other words, I do not recall knowing that someone witnessed the accident. And why is it that you did not call the police later that evening when you got home to report the accident? First of all, we didn't know what was going on with us. We couldn't think straight. And the second reason is we were new people in this country and we didn't really know what we should do in this case. On the date of the accident, or as of the date of the accident, did you or your family have a doctor that you would use regularly when needed? No.